My wife secretly married her boss and stole $250, $0 from our joint account, then falsely claimed I kidnapped her during the custody battle over our house. Now we're in court fighting over everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now let's begin the video, using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here writing about how my wife Emily turned out to be a lying, cheating bitch. The craziest thing, I caught her red-handed, and it shattered everything I thought I knew about her and us. Honestly, I still can't believe how fast everything fell apart. It's like one day, everything seemed normal, and the next, I was staring at a mountain of lies, betrayal, and stolen money I didn't even know she had access to. It all started about 6 months ago. Emily and I had been together for nearly 10 years, married for 7. We had a pretty decent life, a nice house, 2 kids, solid jobs. I'd always thought she was loyal, maybe a little bitchy sometimes, but loyal. Never suspected she'd be capable of what she did. I noticed she started acting distant, secretive even. She'd hide her phone more than usual, texting late at night, deleting messages like her life depended on it. But I brushed it off. I told myself she was just stressed at work or dealing with the kids. Still, something felt off. Then came the day I found the receipts. I was sitting at my desk, going through some old files, and I noticed a bunch of bank statements in her email that I'd never seen before. Curious, I opened them. My stomach sank. Turns out she had transferred over $250, $0 from our joint account, money we'd saved for a down payment on a new house, college funds for the kids, emergency savings. All gone. And it was all going into some account under her boss's name. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was hallucinating at first. That's when I started noticing more things. Her phone was always glued to her hand. She'd slip away during dinner or hide in the bathroom to take calls. I saw her text messages, flirty, suggestive, even outright sexual. I caught her flirting with her boss, a guy named Mark. It was obvious they'd been having an affair for months. She'd always told me she was working late, going to business dinners. But now I knew better. I found hotel receipts, lingerie she bought for him, and even a few explicit texts. One day I decided to follow her. I needed to see for myself. I parked outside her office building and watched her sneak out at lunchtime, not alone but holding hands with Mark. They got into his car and drove off. My blood boiled. I felt sick. How could she do this? How could she betray not just me but our family like this? And all the while she had the nerve to pretend everything was fine at home. It hit me hard. The woman I loved, the woman I'd trusted with everything, was cheating on me with her boss and stealing our money. It was like a punch to the gut every time I thought about it. I felt a mixture of anger, betrayal, and deep sadness. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat there staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd just uncovered. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew that this wasn't going to be easy. Emily was a master at lying, and once she realized I knew, I was sure she'd come up with some bullshit story to cover her ass. The next day, I decided I'd had enough. I called her at work and told her I needed to talk. When she finally came home that evening, her face was tight, defensive. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I knew everything, the affair, the stolen money. Her reaction was priceless. She tried to deny it at first, saying I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. But I pulled out the bank statements, the hotel receipts, the texts. Her face turned pale and she started to sweat. She spun some BS about how she needed the money for us, how Mark was helping her get ahead, how she was just tired of the stress and needed an escape. She called me jealous, insecure, a terrible husband, said I didn't understand her, but I wasn't buying it. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. I couldn't believe I'd married this woman who I thought was my partner, only to find out she'd been secretly screwing her boss and stealing from us. That night I lay awake, furious and hurt. I kept replaying everything in my mind, the lies, the betrayal, the money disappearing from our accounts. I felt numb but also enraged. How dare she do this? How dare she lie to my face and cheat on me? I was starting to see her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who only cared about herself. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I couldn't stay silent. I had to figure out my next move. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind kept racing, trying to piece together what I'd just learned. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but worse, like I'd been stabbed in the back by someone I trusted with my life. Emily, my wife, the woman I'd built a life with, was nothing like I thought she was. She was sneaky, manipulative, and completely selfish. It was like discovering a whole other person, one I never knew existed. I started digging deeper. I needed proof, solid proof, to confront her properly. I hired a private investigator. I didn't want to believe I was doing this, but I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. I needed to know how deep her lies went. Over the next few weeks, the PI gathered more evidence, photos of her, and marked together dates, times, locations. It was worse than I thought. They had been seeing each other regularly, sometimes multiple times a week. She'd even introduced him as her business partner at one point. Meanwhile, I kept my cool at home, pretending everything was normal. I didn't want her to suspect I was onto her. But I was seething inside. Every time I looked at her, I saw her smiling, lying, cheating. It made me feel sick. I started drinking more, trying to numb the pain, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. I felt like I was losing my mind. I was angry at her, furious that she'd betrayed our vows, but I was also heartbroken. I had trusted her with everything, and she had thrown it all away for some stupid affair and greed. One night, I decided to check our bank accounts again, something I should have done earlier. I logged into our joint account and my stomach dropped. The balance was almost zero. I saw more transfers, another $50, $0 gone, paid to some shell company Emily set up. I couldn't believe it. She stolen $500,000 in total. All this time, she'd been lying, scheming, secretly married her boss, and stealing from us. How could someone do that? How could she live with herself? I felt a mixture of rage and disbelief. I was furious at her, but I also felt deeply betrayed. I had built my entire life around her, and she had been planning her escape behind my back. I started thinking about what to do next. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with everything laid out. I couldn't let her spin her lies anymore. I was done being the naive husband. The next day, I arranged to meet her at a coffee shop near her work. I told her I had something important to discuss. When she arrived, she was already defensive, her eyes darting around like she was guilty of something. I pulled out the evidence, screenshots of the bank transfers, the hotel receipts, the texts. Her face changed from annoyance to panic. She tried to deny everything, saying I was paranoid, that I was making it all up. But I had enough. I told her I knew she was cheating, stealing, and lying. I told her I was done. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, claiming she loved me, that she was sorry, that she'd been overwhelmed with stress. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, that Mark was just a fling, that the money was for some emergency, and that I was just overreacting. She begged me to forgive her, to give her another chance. Honestly, I wanted to believe her. Part of me still loved her, or at least wanted to. But I knew better. I knew she was lying again. I could see it in her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that had been hiding the truth all along. I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief that I finally knew the truth, anger that she had lied and betrayed me for so long. I told her she needed to leave, that I wanted nothing to do with her until she sorted herself out. She stormed out, calling me names, crying, accusing me of being controlling and jealous. But I didn't care. I was done. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to face the reality that my marriage was over, and I had to protect what was left of my life and my sanity. That night I sat alone, staring at the empty house, wondering how I got here. How did I go from a happy, trusting husband to a guy who's been blindsided by a wife who was secretly married, cheating, and stealing from us? It's a brutal realization, but I guess I'm learning that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones capable of the worst betrayals. I don't know what's coming next, but I do know one thing. My trust is shattered, and I'll never look at her the same way again. After she left that day, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. The house was eerily quiet and every corner seemed to scream betrayal. I spent the next few days in a fog trying to piece together everything I'd uncovered. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep her lies went. Not just the affair and the theft, but the entire facade she'd built. Her pretending to be the perfect wife, the loving mother. All a lie. I started talking to a lawyer. Honestly, I didn't know what I was doing at first, just trying to understand my rights, what I could do about the money she stole, and how to handle the custody situation. It was a mess. She'd gone from being the perfect wife to being a criminal and a liar. The more I learned, the more furious I got. I found out she had set up a shell company to hide the stolen money, and she'd been funneling it into accounts all over the world. The entire thing was orchestrated. She planned this for months, maybe even years. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I'd always thought she was ambitious, but now I saw her for what she really was, a schemer who'd sell out her own family for a quick buck in some stupid affair. I felt betrayed in every possible way. My trust was completely shattered. I was angry at her, angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, and angry at how easily she'd lied to everyone, including the kids. During this time, I also started noticing the real emotional toll. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Mark or the bank statements, the stolen money. I felt disgusted that I'd been so naive. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I didn't see her true colors earlier. The woman I thought I knew was just a mask she wore to cover her greed and her lies. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, and now I felt like I'd been played for a fool. One day, I decided I needed to confront her again, this time not just with evidence, but with everything I felt. I called her and told her I wanted to meet, to talk about the next steps. She agreed, but her tone was defensive and manipulative. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was overreacting, that she loved me, that she'd do anything to make it right. I didn't buy it. I told her I knew she was married to Mark, that she'd been screwing around with her boss, and that she'd stolen $500,000 from us. Her face turned pale again. She started crying, saying I was ruining her life, that she was sorry, that she'd do anything to fix it. I was done listening to her lies. I told her she had to leave, that I wasn't going to let her stay and manipulate me anymore. I told her I was filing for divorce, that I wanted full custody of the kids, and that I was going to recover every cent she stole. She screamed at me, called me controlling, jealous, insecure, but I didn't care. I was sick of her excuses. I knew she'd lie again if I gave her the chance, so I just laid it all out, proof, accusations, everything. That night I sat alone in the house, thinking about everything, the betrayal, the money, the kids. I felt numb, but also a fire burning inside me. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore. Not as a wife, not as a mother. I had to take control and protect what was left of my life. I started making plans, legal, financial, emotional. This wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. It was about saving myself from the wreckage she'd caused. I knew I had to be strong for my kids, even if it meant going through hell. I'd never imagined how deep a betrayal could cut, but now I was certain of one thing. I'd do whatever it took to get through this, to rebuild from the ruins she left behind. The days that followed were some of the most intense of my life. I was in full-on crisis mode, lawyers, financial advisors, and 1,000 unanswered questions running through my head. I couldn't believe how much damage one person could do in such a short time. Emily, my wife, had turned into a stranger. She was no longer the woman I married, the woman I thought I knew. Instead, she was a liar, a thief, and a manipulator. The fact that she'd married her boss secretly and stolen that much money from us made my stomach churn. I kept replaying everything, trying to find a way to fix it, but deep down I knew I was facing an uphill battle. I got a court order to freeze her accounts and started working with a forensic accountant to trace the stolen money. It was a nightmare. She'd moved it around so much, I wondered if I'd ever see that money again. Meanwhile, I was preparing for the custody battle. The kids, my precious little ones, were caught in the middle of all this chaos. Emily's lies had already started to spiral out of control. She claimed I kidnapped her during the custody fight, that I was some kind of abusive monster, just to get sympathy. That lie made my blood boil. She'd been the one sneaking around, lying and stealing, and now she was spinning stories to turn the court against me. I hired a private investigator to gather evidence of her affair with Mark. I needed proof to show the court that she was unfit as a mother, that her priorities were elsewhere. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about protecting my children from her reckless behavior. The pie came back with photos, texts, and even video footage of her and Mark together. They'd been caught red-handed. I was furious. I knew I had to fight hard, not just for the money, but for the custody of my kids. I couldn't let her manipulate her way into full control, especially after everything she'd done. The court hearings were brutal. Emily was a master at lying, twisting facts, and crying on cue. She played the victim, claiming I was a controlling husband who was trying to ruin her life. She painted herself as the wronged wife, even though I had mountains of evidence showing her affair and theft. I stayed composed, but inside I was boiling. I knew if I let her get away with her lies, she'd take everything: our house, the kids, my sanity. I had to fight hard, and I did. I presented the evidence, told the truth, and made it clear I wanted full custody to protect my children from her chaos. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. I was nervous, but I knew I had to be honest and direct. I explained everything: her affair, the stolen money, her lies during the custody hearing. I wanted the court to see her for what she really was: a woman who lied, cheated, and stole from her own family. It was a hard fight, but I felt a small sense of relief when the judge finally made a ruling in my favor. I was awarded custody of the kids, and Emily was ordered to pay back the stolen money. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough to start rebuilding my life. In the aftermath, I started focusing on healing. I put the house on the market, sorted through the mess she left behind, and worked on rebuilding trust with the kids. I knew I'd never forget what she did, but I also knew I had to move forward. I learned a lot about trust, betrayal, and resilience. I realized that sometimes the people closest to you can be the biggest enemies. And I learned that no matter how deep the betrayal, you can come out the other side if you're willing to fight for it. I still get angry sometimes, and I still wonder how she could do this to us, but I also know I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. And for anyone out there going through something similar, trust your instincts, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Because at the end of the day, you're the only one who can protect what truly matters: your dignity, your kids, and your future. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles, financial chaos, and emotional upheaval. I was exhausted, physically and mentally. Every day felt like a fight to keep my head above water. The house was sold, and I moved into a small apartment with the kids, trying to rebuild some semblance of normalcy. Emily was nowhere to be found most days. She was fighting the custody decision, trying to wiggle her way back into our lives, but I wasn't having it. I'd learned too much about her true nature, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation anymore. The court cases dragged on, but I felt a strange sense of victory each time I saw her squirm. She was furious, bitter, and desperate. She'd lost her house, her career, and her reputation, all because she chose to lie, cheat, and steal. I had to remind myself that I'd done everything in my power to protect my kids and myself. Still, the pain lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been blindsided by someone I'd trusted with my life. It made me question everything: how I'd let her get away with so much for so long. One thing that surprised me was how much I'd grown emotionally. I used to be the guy who'd bottle everything up, but now I was more open about my feelings. I'd cry sometimes, scream at the injustice of it all, but I also learned to stand tall. I found support in friends and a counselor who helped me process all the anger, betrayal, and sadness. I realized that I'd been holding everything in for too long, and that I had to face my pain head-on if I wanted to heal. The biggest challenge was forgiving myself. I kept thinking, what could I have done differently? Was there something I missed? But I quickly understood that sometimes people hide their true selves so well that you don't see the cracks until it's too late. I had to accept that I was blindsided, by her lies, by her greed. And I had to forgive myself for trusting her so blindly for so many years. That was the real key to moving forward, not forgetting but learning. I also started focusing on rebuilding my financial stability. I worked with a financial advisor to recover what I could of the stolen money, and I cut out unnecessary expenses. I wanted to ensure I could provide for my kids without the shadow of her betrayal hanging over us. The legal fees drained a lot of our savings, but I was determined to get back on my feet. I knew I couldn't undo what she did, but I could control my future. I wanted my children to grow up knowing that even in the face of betrayal, you can still rise above. The final court hearing was a relief. The judge's ruling was clear. Emily was ordered to pay restitution, and her parental rights were limited because of her actions. She was furious, calling me every name in the book, screaming about how unfair it all was. But I stayed calm. I knew I'd done everything I could to protect my family, and that was enough. Watching her storm out of that courtroom, I felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't what I wanted initially, but it was what I needed to finally put this nightmare behind me. Now I spend my days trying to rebuild what I lost. I focus on my kids, work, and making sure I never get blindsided like this again. I learned that trust is fragile and that people can hide their true selves behind a mask for a long time. But I also learned that resilience matters. I survived her betrayal and I'm stronger for it. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: trust your gut. Don't ignore the signs. And when someone shows their true colors, don't be afraid to fight back. Because in the end, your dignity and your future are worth more than any lie or betrayal. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'll never let anyone hurt me like that again. I'll rebuild, I'll move on, and I'll make sure my kids see that even when everything falls apart, you can find a way to stand tall again. Looking back now, I realize that this whole ordeal has changed me in ways I never expected. I used to be trusting, maybe too much so. I believed in honesty, loyalty, the kind of stuff they preach in movies and fairy tales. But I learned the hard way that some people are just good at hiding their true selves, and that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. Emily wasn't just a wife who cheated. She was a thief, a liar, someone who shattered everything we built together for her own selfish greed. That realization cut deep, but it also forced me to grow stronger. The hardest part wasn't just losing the money or the marriage. It was losing the illusion of what I thought my life was supposed to be. I had to accept that I'd been naive, that I'd trusted someone who didn't deserve it. But I also learned that even in the darkest moments, you can find a sliver of hope. I started rebuilding piece by piece, focusing on my kids, my health, and my future. I found new purpose in protecting what mattered most: my integrity and my sanity. One thing I've come to understand is that revenge doesn't necessarily mean getting even with someone. Sometimes, it's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your peace of mind. I didn't get to punish Emily the way I wanted, but I did take control. I fought for my children, my right to be a good father, and my own happiness. That's the real victory, not the court rulings or the money recovered, but the fact that I refused to let her destroy me completely. To anyone out there going through something similar, I want to say this: trust is fragile, but your strength is. When someone betrays you, it's okay to be angry, to feel hurt, and even to want revenge. But don't let that bitterness consume you. Use it to motivate your comeback. Get help if you need it. Document everything. Stand your ground. Because at the end of the day, you're the only one responsible for your happiness and your future. Now, I look at my life and see a new beginning. The scars of betrayal will always be there, but they've also made me more cautious, more aware. I know now that trust isn't given lightly anymore, but I also know that I can still love, still hope, and still build something better. My kids are my world, and I owe it to them to be stronger than ever. So I'll leave this story here, not as a warning, but as a testament. Life can throw some brutal punches, but you get to decide whether you stay down or fight back. I chose to fight. And I'll keep fighting for my kids, for myself, and for the hope that someday I'll find peace again. That's all I can do now. And honestly, that's enough.